At some point, usually late at night, a number sneaks into your head. 30. And then another number follows it. How much you've saved. And suddenly the room feels a little quieter. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people won't say out loud. If you haven't saved enough by 30, you're not behind. But you are inside a system that quietly changed the rules, and almost nobody noticed. Let me explain. For decades, there was a clean story. Go to school, get a job, save a little every month. Compound interest does the rest. By 30, you were supposed to have 1 year of salary saved. By 40, 3 times. By 60, you were secure. Simple, neat, and mostly outdated. Because that story assumed something that no longer exists, a stable timeline. Today, money doesn't move in straight lines. It lurches. Rent jumps faster than salaries. Education costs front-load debt into your 20s. Healthcare waits quietly in the future like a bill with no due date. So when someone says if you don't have X saved by 30, you failed, they're using math from a different economy. Let's look at what actually happens. Your 20s are no longer your highest savings decade. They're your most expensive learning decade. You pay for degrees. You pay for mistakes. You pay for moving cities. You pay for figuring out what not to do. That's not irresponsibility. That's friction. And the system charges interest on friction. Here's where the math gets uncomfortable. Most people don't fall behind because they don't save. They fall behind because their saving window gets compressed. If rent takes 40% of your income, if debt takes another 20%, if emergencies eat the rest, you're not failing to save. There's nothing left to save. And compound interest doesn't care why. It just quietly waits. Now, this is where the internet usually steps in with hype. Just invest earlier. Just buy assets. Just start a side hustle. As if time, energy, and risk tolerance are infinite. They're not. The reality is more awkward. For most people, serious saving doesn't begin until their 30s. Not because they're lazy, but because that's when income finally outruns survival. And that changes the timeline completely. Here's a number nobody likes to hear. If you start investing heavily at 35 instead of 25, you don't need double the money. You need roughly 1.7 times more. That's the penalty. Not catastrophic, but real. And it gets framed as moral failure instead of structural math, which is convenient because it keeps the focus on individual panic instead of system design. Zoom out for a second. We built a financial world where the most important decade for compounding is also the decade when people are the least financially flexible. That's not an accident. It's a trade-off. Society pushes costs early and rewards late, and then acts surprised when anxiety shows up in the middle. So if you haven't saved enough by 30, here's the part nobody tells you. The question isn't, am I behind? The real question is, what phase are you actually in? Accumulation doesn't start when you turn a certain age. It starts when 3 things align. Income stabilizes, major expenses stop exploding, and decisions stop being reversible. That might be 28, it might be 38. The danger isn't starting late. The danger is believing you're late and freezing. Because panic creates worse math than delay. Bad investments, over-risking, chasing returns instead of building capacity. That's how people lose decades, not years. And this is where things get quietly risky. The longer this system continues, the more wealth concentrates in people who could save early. Not because they were smarter, but because they were structurally earlier. And that gap doesn't close with motivation. It closes with policy, or patience, or time. And time is the one thing no one feels like they have at 30. So no, if you haven't saved a magic number by 30, you don't need to panic. But you do need to understand the game you're in. Because the rules changed, the clock didn't stop, and the next decade matters for a very different reason than the last one did. The only unresolved question is this. Now that you know the timeline was never fair, what are you going to measure yourself against instead? Not the number, but the phase, and whether you're finally entering the one that actually compounds.